All right, gang, coming up on the show right now. Very excited to have this guy, especially because this movie that we're going to talk about has a very haunted house like feel to it. And he is the production designer that led the charge in making it look very creepy. I am stoked to have the boy behind the door production designer on the show, Mr. Ryan Brett Puckett. How you doing, sir?
Doing good. How are you doing, Jimmy?
Doing good, man. This, like I said, like we're getting close to hunt season. The house that the boys, are in looks very creepy. Looks like it could be developed into something. Um, the thing too, man, like films like Don't Breathe, like that whole franchise getting the sequel, like not having getting to check out this film fully yet, but getting to see some stuff. It has almost like that vibe to it, like that really intense, uh, I guess survivalist, I guess, for lack of a better term, horror
Oh
film.
yeah,
And this had to have just been a really cool experience getting to design this whole aesthetic that went into this thing.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean the script was awesome like right out of the gate. So it's fun getting to sit down and like just read something and immediately start getting an idea of where you want to run with it.
Mhm.
And then watching it develop over time as we were figuring things out was really exciting. Just the collaboration working between the directors and the cinematographer, figuring it out, and getting a chance to check out the house location the very first time
Mhm.
immediately kind of sealed the deal. It's like, this place is sweet. It needs a ton of work, but we can totally make it work for the story. And I immediately felt really good about what we could do with it. And seeing the final movie and how it came out, like I'm pretty happy with what we were able to achieve in terms of hopefully pairing that look with the story and what needed to go on with the characters to have a cohesive feel for the audience watching it.
This job that you do in particular, production designer, it's not something that we get to have a lot of guests come on and talk about working on a film. I don't know. It's like we get like a cool amount of actors, actresses, directors,
Yeah.
director of photography, even.
Yeah.
But production design, man, is something that coming from film school where they make you do everything, so
Mhm.
you have that appreciation. Like production design, people I think underappreciate the amount of work that goes into something like that, like coming up with a style and a lookbook
Mhm.
and your palette and your collaborative, having to like collaborate with you know team leads and everything to get this
Mhm.
thing dialed in, fully from every angle. That is pretty almost like a producer in a sense where you're designing the entire thing that the guy is producing, and then you have
Yeah.
obviously the director. He or she is trying to execute the entire thing, but
Yeah.
go, going through, I was just gonna say with that, what was it that got you into wanting to do that? Because going on like a movie tour, like we just went to
Oh,
Warner
man.
Brothers not too long ago and did their thing,
Cool.
and that's like always one of the things that hangs me up is the design, especially when they leave like a sound stage untouched for a while and
Yeah.
allow you to go see like the whole
Yeah.
design production design aspect has always fascinated me. So what got you into wanting to do that?
Oh man. I think most of us that do this end up falling into it from a really, you know, oddball background. Like it's not something people like immediately go into film and, as kids, they're like, I want to be a production designer. It's such a weird, undefined job. And I just grew up making weird things, working in a shop, just tinkering around with, anything from electronics to, trying to build small things, and
Hmm.
always kind of had that knack. And when I was really young and started kind of like getting caught by movies and it capturing my imagination. I was always really enamored by things being able to exist that, you know, really aren't out there. Like I grew up in a really bland suburban environment, and to all of a sudden, you know, see something really fantastic in a movie that, you know, may or may not exist was like this really exhilarating thing. But I didn't know that's a job that people can actually do in terms of films. And
Yeah.
you know, I went and, you know, went to school, got a normal job working in an office, and sort of started stumbling into art a little bit. Found myself in LA with some friends who are writers and producers and directors, and they brought me along to a feature film like right when I moved here, and I just needed a job, and ended up doing a horror movie for Lionsgate with some friends called Children of Sorrow quite a while back, and had no idea what it was. I just knew, like, you know, there's someone with a camera, there's a director. I understand that, at writers and actors. And we just came out, and it's like, okay, we have to build, you know, a compound for a cult, and we need to find things to make it look creepy. It's like, okay, I can figure out what, you know, creepy and interesting is,
Yeah.
and just started doing it, and started getting calls from other people to do the same job, and just started doing it because it was work, and, you know, it beats walking dogs, which I was doing
No, for sure, for
before.
sure, for sure.
I love animals too. And I didn't really understand what it was. And I think I was probably doing it for 2 or 3 years before I actually started to admit, like, oh man, I'm a production designer. I actually really love this. And actually started kind of throwing my efforts into figuring out, like, how do you do the job well? Where can I take this? You know, what type of movies do I love? And really kind of focusing that vision and trying to figure out, like, what kind of tools do I need to learn to start executing those ideas and bringing it to an actual screen for viewers. And it's just kind of a constant learning process. But yeah, we're always hiding behind the camera. Like, we're not really the most out there people on a film crew. So it's like we don't do interviews as often about this kind of thing.
Well, and that's why it's cool to get to hear you talk about it. When you did that film for Lionsgate, when you first came out, was that like when Lionsgate was the indie horror, almost like the Blumhouse, kind of came up not too long ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was, I think we created it in 2011. And I think it was about 2012 or 2013 it came out. And it's still around. Every now and then I run into people who've seen it. It's a great, how to explain it, sort of almost pseudo documentary cult film that's like absolutely creepy and really cringe inducing. And Bill Oberst Jr. is the lead in it. He's absolutely phenomenal character in it. And so yeah, that kind of started that path of, like, I just fell into doing feature films really quickly, and then, you know, had to learn all the rest of it.
That's pretty cool, man. The Lionsgate scene in that 2010, 2011 time. I mean, that was really when the Twisted Pictures, like the Saws and stuff, were really instrumental. So I got having a horror film under that Lionsgate banner in that early 2010 timeline, that really is a pretty dope era for, like, kind of a resurgence, a new wave in horror, especially indie horror.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I kind of jumped into the deep end of that pool really quick without knowing what I was doing.
And you progress and you find yourself to the boy behind the door. When you work and you get the script in your hand, like, are you immediately, as you read the thing, are you like sketching up designs in your mind as you go? Do you like to read the whole thing, kind of digest it, come back to it? Like, what was the process with Boy Behind the Door and you? Did you know instantly when you dove in, or was it more of a let the story develop for you?
I mean, I think like most people, when I read, you start to get like images in your head of what you expect the space to be based on the words you're you're reading as you go through. But I have a tendency when I first get scripts to just plow through it
Mm,
and just let it wash over you and not pay attention to the work necessarily.
right, right.
It's I still love to be like captivated by movies and like really sucked into them, regardless of being concerned about is this real or not? Like, is the emotion there that I'm really going to get excited about? And so I'll usually like plow through the script and just really try to get a feel of the entire tone of it, like where it's going and how it should feel. And then the next day I'll like reread it all over again and start thinking about like, okay, this is going to be really difficult to do. And, how should this look? And like, what's the color going to be as we work through it? And, it's like you'll read a script 100 times by the time you're finished shooting the
Mm,
film, as you just like revisiting portions of it
for sure.
to make sure that you're like working up a consistent arc from the beginning to the end that really says what you're hoping to say with it. As you're creating the imagery to help sell that story and sort of support the actors and everything else that's going on for it.
So what was this? What was it about the story for you that you knew like this is going to be a really cool horror film?
Oh man, I really love the perspective of the two boys in this scenario. The like underlining, just friendship thread that kind of pulls you through the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an interesting element of having this like wholesome core to something that's otherwise just really wretched across the surface. And I mean, it's a
Mm-hmm.
really deplorable premise that we just kind of skirt the whole way through. And just seeing their determination and positivity of like working through this problem to like save themselves because their bond as friends is so strong. That part immediately grabbed me. And then, kind of the twist of who's our kidnapper. When I first read that on the page and like, won't talk about it too much, just so we don't spoil anything for
Right,
anybody who hasn't watched it. But like,
right.
first time reading it on page and not having any clue, especially because you have no visual cues when you're reading a script, to get 2/3 of a way into it and then realize that all the stereotypes that you latch onto when you read or watch, horror films or, any popular media, we kind of fall into these stereotypes of what you think something is supposed to be or who a certain person is going
Mm-hmm.
to be in a context, and to have that totally flipped on you totally blew me away. And it's like, okay, cool, let's do this. Like I was fully sold at that point and really wanted to see that through in the best way possible. So that at that point I knew it's like I want to sit down with these guys and talk about it and like let's see what they would like to do and if we can make this work.
I know there's a particular, the bulk of the house or the bulk of the movie, um, the conflict is centered around, being in that house and, like you said, the two boys trying to figure out the situation and how to solve it and do it together. Was there a particular, aspect of that house or even one of the scenes that isn't at the house that particularly enjoyed putting together for this?
I mean, the house on a whole was really fun to play with. I mean, it was an absolute nightmare. It was a really difficult location to work in to achieve the look we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't a very accommodating space in terms of making modifications to it. So everything we were doing was kind of like walking on eggshells to
Mm-hmm.
preserve the space and still achieve what we wanted to do. But spending the time trying to figure out how to take the rooms that existed and turn them into a maze was like a really fun challenge. And it was like this evolving process over the course of like a couple of weeks in pre-production. And even I think we were like at least a week into production and we were still figuring out some of the other rooms, how to present them as they got to the end of um, the way they were working through the house until they could both get away freely. That was like a really interesting and fun challenge because it's like you're kind of building a maze in your head
Mm-hmm.
and like constantly thinking out of it over courses of days of like, okay, well, from the camera's perspective, we're going to move through a hallway in this certain direction, and how is that going to look to the viewer, and are they going to understand that once we cross through this door that we're in this different part of the house, even though it didn't actually exist at the house, and just trying to work through that. So hopefully it makes sense in the final way the film was cut. And I feel like we did an okay job of it making sense. It gets a little crazy at the end as the house gets more confusing. But that was really fun. And the trunk scene at the beginning, the early kidnapping stuff was a really fun challenge. Because it's like, I mean, when we first sat down, it's like, how do you shoot kids in the dark and make it dramatic and have some tension there? Because it's like you always need a little bit of light to film to see something, even though that's not how reality usually works if you're in a circumstance like that. And
for sure,
leaning on the sounds of the breathing and like kicking at the trunk, and little cracks of light starting to trickle in and lights starting to flicker as the wiring's kind of getting jostled around. That was a really interesting challenge. And it's also fun when you just get to take the back half of a car and start cutting holes in it. So it's not something you get to do on a normal day. Usually you're told not to destroy things like that. And then when it becomes your job, it's kind of fun to get a chance to hack something up and make it work.
So what did you guys use to carve up the hole in the car?
A bunch of grinders, and a little bit of saws, metal saws. But yeah, I think we ended up cutting I think we had 4 different portholes cut into a single trunk. And as we rotated through, the cameras would bounce around different sides, and we'd shoot out a portion of the kids, or mostly Bobby, in there, since he spent more time in the trunk than everybody. But it was an entirely different car than the one that they actually get shown picked up in, and then the one that he finally jumps out of. So we had a primary car that was the kidnapper's vehicle that the kids get thrown into, and you see them briefly with the trunk open. But then the car that they were actually in the trunk was a totally different vehicle. That just it was a cooler looking trunk. So we kind of shot with that because it worked better for the story, and then figured out how to create those shots in a way that they could be edited together to feel like they were still in the original car and escaping from that. It was a fun challenge to work through, and one of the first things that we were all concerned about and that we wanted to figure out how to do best as possible, and safe for the kids.
How was that experience of working with the kids? Every once in a while there's a story, you get like the stories like, it and Bill Skarsgård scaring the shit out of them, on set up until the point. This looks like it scary, but also be intense. Those 2 boys have to like put together like an acting performance that is really like solid, with being, the best friends that they are. Like, you got to make people actually believe that, they are, who they're pretending to be. And so that's a lot to ask of a kid actor. It's a lot to ask of a kid in general. And so whenever, I think that's what makes like it Stand By Me, from what I've seen in this movie, that much more standout-ish, more special, a better horror film when you get performances like that. So what was that like on set, seeing all that? How were they on set?
I mean, that part was an absolute trip, and I think it's like a testament to how professional Lonnie and Ezra are. The whole, almost the entire bulk of the movie is the 2 kids, and so like when you're working with younger actors, you have much more limited amount of time with them, and so there was a lot of scheduling hurdles we had to deal with, and like figuring out how we could get everything we needed with them. And so it was this intense pace of working with them, but in terms of like the emotion and giving the performances they needed, they were both so good at like turning it on as soon as it needed to be there, and then we'd call cut and they could like turn it back off and go back to being kids that were hanging out. And we did shoot quite a few nights, but a lot of it happened in the daytime, and we kind of created the sets and worked with the lighting to sell it as like later in the evenings. middle of the night, a lot of like rainy, dark weather. And so it's like, it would be bright, hot, sunny outside. We'd be in the house and immediately you're in this like oppressive, dark, creepy maze. And, but they would still be like these, bubbly, happy kid personalities.
Yeah.
And, we'd get through these super intense scenes where it's just like almost like heartbreaking. And, they've got tears coming down their faces and they like look like they're absolutely scared to death. And you yell cut and it's like, all right, cool. We've got to do like a little switch over with some lights and camera. Like you guys can come back in 15 minutes. And they'd be like immediately down in the parking lot with an RC car or a soccer ball, just having a blast. And I think it helped keep everything really fun and relaxing on set, because everybody was just really stoked to be just like working with a bunch of people that were like happy and really enjoying the project, and giving these great performances. And so it gave you that little like brief breather to kind of like relax and energize and then dive back more into this really intense dark shooting.
How long?
So it was.
Or go ahead. Sorry.
It made for an interesting experience, and it kind of contradicted the usual stereotype of don't work with kids and animals and movies. Like it wasn't like that at all. So it was great.
When did you guys film it?
Oh man, that was I think we started pre-production, or at least I did, late in January of 2019, and I think we started shooting mid-February or so. And so it was like February through March of 2019. So it was kind of early, weird LA weather time. So we had a few rainy days, a lot of weird, warm, sunny days, and we had to figure out how to make all of it look like it was, moody winter somewhere the whole time.
The thing about that too is looking into that is shooting production wise, you guys didn't have a whole lot of hassle yet with the coronavirus then.
No, like it fortunately came in well before that. And I think maybe I had some hiccups with the film getting released. It would have been nice if we could have like actually gone to some festivals, because it did really great at festivals, and we just had to like sit home and watch it. Streaming, which it's like I'm glad a lot of people got to see it that way, because sometimes it's hard to make it to festivals and only like a limited number of people get to view like some amazingly creative films. And so there was kind of an upside of streaming being available for this one. But it was nice not having any of those production constraints by the time we got through that.
It's interesting the way that, and maybe rightfully so, but it's just interesting the way that it's really kind of changed, revolutionized the way that these films are being made now. Like we, just did a low budget short with some actors who are, were theater actors, and then obviously couldn't work in the theater right now. But everything from, we got Disney Plus. We watched Raya and the Last Dragon, and there's a behind the scenes thing that's literally like every actor, actress in that film and everybody who cut that film did it from home, which is wild to
absolutely.
See. And horror movies on Shudder. Speaking of which, you had a film earlier during the pandemic, like Host, that was on Shudder, and that was completely, obviously filmed at home, as the whole thing takes place over like a Zoom call. Like the fact that that kind of has shaped the way that the entertainment industry is now going to exist is pretty wild. Since this movie, which everybody needs to check out, but since this movie, in your experience, like, have you worked on a project where you have, had to account for coronavirus yet?
Oh, very much. I was and still am working on American Horror Story.
Oh wow! Okay.
Currently, the production designer on that, Chloe Arbiter, is a good friend that we all kind of came up together, and it was pure happenstance. Towards the end of 2019, I had just finished up working some projects and they were starting season 10, and they're like, hey, do you want to come over and work with us on season 10? And it's just like, absolutely. Like, working with friends is great, and a chance to work on something like Horror Story, it's like, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
And I think we were about 2 months into just prepping when everything shut down. And so we ended up working off and on over the course of all the stay-at-home orders, trying to finish designs, create sets, get construction stuff going, all while working at home. And then as things slowly started opening up, we were some of the early productions to get back into working on the studio lots and into picking up where we left off once everybody went home to get ready. And then by later in the year, we started shooting full time, and it's masks, face shields, very rigid protocols in terms of where you can and can't go, keeping way less people on sets. And it's been very successful, and like we've worked through the show really well, but it's a completely different experience than working anything just a year before that. It's an interesting adjustment for sure.
We have gotten to interview Aaron at the festival that we have done, or that we do the panel production for, the Comic-Con. Aaron Kruger, who did the makeup for like Twisty the Clown and stuff earlier in the heydays of American Horror Story.
Yes.
When it really caught a lot of attention after Freak Show, that it was just like Walking Dead Stratosphere status. And now season 10, that's awesome, man. Congratulations. I mean, the marketing design material starting to like really start to come out heavily now as we're getting closer, along with Horror Stories that's out right now, kind of as the countdown to season 10.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That but man, like the fact that you're adding like talent like Macaulay Culkin to that cast, like that's freaking wild.
It's going to be a wild season. I can assure you, it's going to be an interesting one to watch for sure.
With with that, I gotta the production design. I gotta tell you, being that kind of a nerd who gets blown away by that stuff, American Horror Story has been there. The house from Boy Behind the Door looks like it could be a house that could be used. Do you go to a Halloween thing? Like, do you go to Universal for Halloween Horror Nights at all?
Oh God, I absolutely love it. It's so much fun. Okay. It's so fun.
Is there a particular house that, as a production designer, you were like, holy shit, like this is freaking awesome?
Oh man. Like at Horror Nights, or just like a house in a film? I mean, Horror Nights.
Either or. Horror Nights always blows me away just because it's a situation where they're building like true to form. It feels like true to form, like movie sets.
It is,
for the thing.
It's amazing. Man, that's a toss up. I think I got to do it twice. And like I've mentioned this before in other interviews, like I'm a sucker for Alien, period. But I think, isn't it like it's like an Alien versus Predator house they do that every time I do it, I love it. And the fact that, Alien is such a distinct and difficult character to do, like in terms of like a really wild proportioned costume.
Right.
And for them to do a house like that with so many people in a costume like that, like sneaking out of corners and jumping out of places at you so effectively.
For sure.
That's the one that like I run out the other side of it just like screaming and giggling at the same time.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, that was kind of like, I don't know if you got to do I think it was the year before, 2 years ago, year before they had to cancel, Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like the same deal where I was more. They got me a couple times, but it was more the fact that they like were able to maneuver in the big costumes and everything.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's pretty cool. The fact that you talk about Aliens, that franchise, you talk about production design. I mean, my God. Was there a film, in straight horror that you loved? Because I mean, the Aliens is definitely, sci-fi horror, obviously, but
Yes.
was there a like straight horror movie when you were a kid, like Exorcist or like Jaws or anything that really got you in? And if it was Alien, if it was Alien, that was Alien. But I'm curious. Like everybody always says, it was Jason, Michael, Freddy, or Exorcist, Jaws. Those are like the top five. And every once in a while, we get some like outliers, like Night of the Living Dead or a foreign
Oh
one. Or anything.
man, those are good ones. As like a really young kid
Yeah,
who wasn't necessarily into horror, Jaws was the one that I first watched where like legitimately scared me and kind of like traumatized me for a bit. But it's also such a well done, meticulous movie that like I think I watch it at least once or twice a year normally. And like the scares still work perfectly, even when you know they're coming every time, which I think is like a testament to a really good film. But like for some reason, I fell into watching a lot of like Hitchcock type stuff as a young kid, and it's like, by today's standards, it's certainly not like scary.
right.
But like, the birds and things like that really kind of captured my imagination as a kid. And so it's like little things like that. But I feel like there's a big gap in time from being like a really small child until like teens, where all of a sudden I just didn't care or really pay attention to movies. It was all just like, I'll watch Dumb and Dumber or Ace Ventura or something like that, because that's just what my friends were watching, but nothing that I got really excited about. And then as I got older, like when Seven came out, that absolutely blew my mind, as far as like, it's a sort of a horror, it's a thriller, like the cinematography, the production design, the editing, the music are just absolutely impeccable, and like not like anything I'd ever seen before. And stuff like that really started getting the gears working in my head about thinking of film as like this creative thing that actually, people have to think about and sit there and work out all the details until they can make it so that we can then watch it. And it was like things like that kind of like really what started me in the direction of kind of where I ended up now.
That's awesome, man. The fact too that you're getting a feature and a featured series out really within, call it the last quarter of 2021, like towards the end of 2021. That's a pretty awesome way to end out the year.
It's not bad. It's not bad. I think COVID kind of compressed everything, and now all of a sudden, hopefully, once people started getting a chance to shoot again, I feel like we might have had this like hole where not a lot was coming out. And now, towards the end of this year and next year, I think a lot of really interesting films and projects are going to start hitting the streamers and the theaters. Hopefully, once we can get back into them more consistently,
For sure.
and we'll start getting to have those experiences that we love around various films and series.
Yeah, it definitely starts to feel, it's starting to feel like we're in that like backstock phase where like every weekend now it's like multiple things, either shows and or films are coming out, and it's getting to be like going from starving to struggling to keep up, which is
Yes.
Talk about like first world problem. But with that, obviously you're busy, you're working on the show and stuff, but is there something that you're watching in your downtime right now that you're like, this is super rad? Not even horror necessarily.
Oh man. I haven't been able to watch nearly as much stuff as I wanted, but I have been a sucker for like the Disney Plus Marvel stuff lately.
Yeah.
And I'm not even like a big Marvel person, but Loki and WandaVision, I think, are some of the most interesting things I've seen in a while. Yeah. So, and I mean, they still, play with a lot of the, the styles and the things we expect out of those movies, but I think they got a chance to sort of like twist it in just enough way to get really interesting. And those kind of excited me a bit lately.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, man, we went to Avengers Campus at Disneyland.
Oh, how is it? I'm dying to go.
It's pretty dope. Like
Cool.
I'm definitely more Star Wars, and my wife is definitely more Marvel. But like you, especially you being in production design, the thing that I kept saying to her every time we walked in there is with Bugs Land, when it was Bugs Land, it felt very small.
Yes.
And whatever they did, the way that they put the buildings at the angles that they put them in, it's like an optical illusion that makes you think that you're in like a space that's like 3 times the size that you're in. And it makes it super cool. Like you come to the middle of kind of like the hub where the ride and the restaurant and Doctor Strange and everything is at, and it's pretty dope. Like it's like, have you been to the Star Wars one yet?
Oh
Have you
yeah,
gone?
definitely. I mean,
I
both.
mean,
That's what I was curious about the Avengers campus. That Disney Imagineer magic of playing with perspective and layouts to really put you in immersive space is something that I absolutely love. And I was absolutely dying for Galaxy's Edge to open because it's like,
yeah,
they spent so much time working out that world. And I mean, I'm a pretty big sucker for any time I can just wander around Disney and like admire the artistry that the craftspeople put into, like, the subtle details of just like how they edge out a fence,
yeah,
and
yeah.
transition, various things and everything. It's everything we do creating films, but they have to make it in a real world circumstance where everybody can just walk up and touch it. It's not, distance on a screen.
My
It's
my wife always teases me because I always wig out at the transition tunnel of Galaxy's Edge and Frontierland,
Yep,
and
exactly.
I always look up, and she's like, she always just shakes her head, and I'm like, you have to understand like the dopeness of the fact that you're going from like Moab, Bryce Canyon, Utah to whatever. I'm like, look at the texture and like look at all that, and she's like, you are a huge. I'm like, I get it, but it's pretty
I'm that
cool.
person. We do it all day. Our
Um,
things when we're there with friends, we walk around and we just like tap on things. It's like, what's it made of?
yeah, yeah, like that's the movie magic of it too, man. Like the whole it looks like a rock, but it's really a piece of styrofoam. Like that whole thing.
Yep.
Like um the Marvel land, they have Loki, which I don't know what he's wearing now, but when that show was coming out, the like walk around Loki character was changing his get up depending on what was happening on the show.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
the first couple weeks he's like in his inmate suit, and then he's like progressed to the TVA shirt and tie, but he still had the collar thing on. So
Oh, cool.
the week we were there, we had that Loki, and we were in California Adventure on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and I told my wife, I'm like, oh shit, like we're gonna see two different ones. What?
Yeah.
And so he went Wednesday night. We're in Disneyland, and the social media like drops this trailer, and it's the presidential. Let's take a stab at Trump-esque Loki from like season or from like F5, and
Yep.
he's like doing this proclamation inside of Avengers Campus, and I'm like, he's like, they're gonna fucking do that
Wow.
tomorrow, and so he shows up, and if you watch like videos on YouTube or whatever, they do like this really cool stunt show, and it's like this multi-leveled building, and so there's constant characters in that land, and if they're not taking photos directly with you, they're like showing up on the different levels of this building and waving at you.
Oh,
And
wow.
so when I say people are thirsty for Loki, people are thirsty for Loki right now. And
Good.
we had seen the TVA one on Tuesday night, and the way they're doing it, which is not like any better than just having people line up, but I guess the coronavirus protocol for the characters to not have a line. So now the answer is everyone just gathers in a mosh pit, and whoever like gets to go up goes up. And so he's up like on this bench, and he's standing there, so the picture is like you're in front of him, And I went up there, and my wife was like, "You cut in front of a bunch of people." I'm like, "There's no line. Like, I don't know what you want me to do." She's like, "Okay." She did a selfie, and we were gone. And so 2 days later, fast forward, we know it's presidential Loki. I'm like, that's the coolest one. Like, we're gonna get a picture of him now.
Yeah.
And I'm asking the lady, I'm like, okay, like, do I got to tip you some money? Like, when's Loki coming out? And she's like, she like gets a grand, and she's like, he's gonna show up at like 2:00. I'm like, okay, cool. Come back at 2:00, and he's up on the balcony. I'm like, shit, like, we're not gonna get this cool picture with them. We wave at him, whatever. This dude walks up, and he's like, hey, like, the one time he's on like floor level 1 in that costume is at 3:00. Like, that's the only chance.
Cool. Yep.
And so I'm like, okay. So now it's like 2:30. Everyone's like kind of like gathering. They're like, don't line up, don't line up. Everyone's just kind of like circling around each other. And like 3:00 hits, 2:55 hits, and Iron Man comes out. Everyone's like, shit. Like,
only Iron Man.
Like movie Jingle All the Way with the Bobcat and all the things beating the shit out of him. And so then they do the stunt show. And so they're like, we have to back you up. We're going to do the stunt show. And there was like one cast member that was like, first 5 people in line, don't worry about it. I got you. I got you. Don't worry about it. And so we back up as soon as the stunt show's over with. Huge mob, because at this point everybody knows Loki's about to show up. And that cast member like pulled up, like, he's like, this guy, this girl, this girl, this guy. Cool. And it was like being in a Marvel movie. It was like Endgame all over again.
Cool.
But yeah, when you get a chance, that it's definitely worth going over there. And the food that they did there, if anything, it's worth going and just eating at the Ant-Man restaurant, because everything was super good.
That sounds amazing. I'm excited now. Cool.
But man, like, I know, getting back on the horror thing, The Boy Behind the Door, that film is now available for people to check out, right?
Yep. I think last Thursday it premiered. So
all the regular streaming, Amazon, Apple, all that stuff.
Ooh, actually, I don't know. I think it might just be exclusively to Shudder right now.
Oh,
I haven't heard.
Okay, we'll definitely look that up. Put it in the show notes. I do think
I'm curious.
You may be right, because I know on the trailer the Shudder logo does the flicker on the bottom of the screen, so it may just be Shudder for a little bit before it does go to VOD. But we'll find out. But the film does look awesome. I can't wait to watch the full thing. I cannot wait. I hope later on in the fall you'll come back in after American Horror Story does it, has its full run, so I can ask you questions and be like, bro, on this episode, what happened? Did you get to see any of this stuff as you were prepping for season 10? Did you get to see any of the stuff for American Horror Stories?
I have not. No. They are completely independent of us. And yeah, like they're on the lot near us, but we don't know what they've been shooting. I haven't even had a chance since it started. 3 weeks now since the first one up?
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4.
I think this week was maybe the 4th episode. I need to catch up and see what they're doing, because I know quite a few of the people that have been making it, and we've both been just buried staying up with what our task at hand is. So I have no idea what each other are doing. So I'm curious to see what they made of it.
Number one, I can tell you, because I always do the thing where it comes out weekly, unless it's something like Mandalorian where I cannot wait. I'll always give it like 2 or 3 weeks. That way I can kind of binge a little bit and then kind of cycle something else and come back 2 or 3 episodes. There it is. And so I'm through number 1 and 2 on Horror Stories, and it centers, I was like super stoked. It centers around House from season 1 and the rubber.
Good. Cool.
So it's
Cool.
it's a cool, very cool like homage. It's cool to see American Horror Story kind of really build upon this universe that it's spent all this time building, but now it's actually like giving it its own like separate thing too, which is dope.
There's a lot of cool stuff to pull from there and work on.
Anyway, man, where can everybody keep track on you, see you, what you do have, and you are able to share with like the socials and such? Where can everybody see what you're up to?
I mean, if anybody follows me on social, I think they're just going to end up getting cat photos and food pictures. Yeah, I think I'm at like Ryan B. Puckett on Instagram, and that might be the only one I actually update other than my website, which website never gets updated until a show's already out. So it's not particularly exciting, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, hopefully just as new projects are done, I can just keep, chatting places like here about what people can see coming up soon.
Right on, man. Well, we will definitely be keeping in touch, like I said, once Horror Story does its thing. And anytime you got something fun in the works that you want to talk about, we definitely will look forward to getting you back on. But thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a treat. Thanks, Jimmy.
Right on.